Suburbia is a strange and delicate ecosystem. Behind every manicured lawn, neatly trimmed hedge, and freshly painted mailbox lurks a fragile social contract. You smile at the mailman, you keep your weeds to a minimum, and you mind your own business. Break that contract, however, and the consequences can be spectacularly messy. In the spring of 2001, I learned just how quickly the illusion of a welcoming neighborhood could shatter, and exactly what it takes to establish absolute, unquestionable dominance in a new territory. Spoiler alert. It does not involve baking a pie. It involves abandoning all societal decency, a pair of dangerously thin plastic grocery bags, and a tactical biological strike that my street would never forget. This is the story of my first and violently last neighborhood dispute. The year was 2001, and I had just signed the papers on a charming split-level house in a quiet, leafy cul-de-sac. It was the quintessential suburban dream, a place where my 3-year-old son, Lysander, could safely burn off his endless, sticky-fingered energy, and my 1-year-old daughter, Cressida, could master the art of crawling without encountering urban hazards. It was also a sanctuary for my 3 rescue cats, Bramble, Fig, and Barnaby, who, after years of cramped apartment living, finally had a backyard to patrol. Inside the house, my absolute pride and joy was the flooring. The entire entryway, hallway, and kitchen were paved in pure, unadulterated white linoleum. It was a bold choice for a mother of a toddler, an infant, and 3 felines, but I loved it. That stark, clinical white meant there was nowhere for dirt to hide. If it was clean, I knew it for an absolute fact. Every single morning, before the coffee had even finished brewing, I was on that floor with a steaming mop, erasing the invisible footprints of the day before. With a baby dragging her bare knees across the ground, my standards for hygiene bordered on the obsessive. We had barely been in the house a week when our first garbage day arrived. I was determined to make a good impression as the new resident. The night before, I had meticulously bagged all our moving debris, ensuring every black plastic sack was tightly knotted and securely deposited into our designated municipal bin. At precisely 7 in the morning, I rolled the heavy container down the driveway, aligning it perfectly with the curb, just as the neighborhood guidelines dictated. Satisfied, I retreated indoors, completed my daily ritual of mopping the white floors until they gleamed like fresh porcelain, and packed Lysander and Cressida into our beige station wagon for a grocery run. The morning was crisp, the neighborhood was silent, and I felt a profound sense of peace. That peace evaporated the second I unlocked my front door 2 hours later. I pushed the heavy oak door open, expecting the familiar scent of pine cleaner. Instead, I was hit by an olfactory assault of rancid oil, oxidized metal, and rotting organic decay. I froze on the threshold, my hands gripping the handles of the grocery bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. My pristine, gleaming hallway was buried under a jagged mosaic of hazardous waste. Someone had forcefully shoved handfuls of loose garbage through the brass mail slot in the center of the door. The debris had exploded across the white linoleum in a horrific spray. There were jagged tin can lids, their edges sharp enough to sever a tendon, smelling strongly of days-old tuna. There were shards of broken green glass catching the morning sunlight. Soggy, molding coffee grounds were smeared across the baseboards, mixed with greasy fast food wrappers and torn, sodden cardboard. My breath caught in my throat. I looked down at Cressida, who was squirming in her car seat, just seconds away from being set down on that floor. Had I not gone grocery shopping, had I just been in the kitchen while she explored the hallway, she would have dragged her soft, bare knees directly over those rusted razor blades and glass shards. The shock lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then a bomb went off in my frontal lobe. The heat of pure, unadulterated maternal rage flushed through my neck and settled behind my eyes. I didn't just see red. I saw a blinding, vibrating white. All traces of the polite, decent suburban mother vanished, replaced by something entirely feral. I stepped backward, pulling the children out of the doorway. As I turned to lock them safely in the car for a moment, I noticed the street. It was too quiet. The suburban camouflage was active, but I could see the subtle twitching of lace curtains in the houses across the street. People were watching. They were waiting for a reaction. I marched over to the house directly adjacent to mine. An elderly man in a faded windbreaker was aggressively hosing down his already immaculate driveway, trying far too hard to look busy. I didn't bother with a greeting. I asked him, my voice dangerously low and devoid of any pleasantry, who had just vandalized my home. He stopped the hose, refusing to meet my eyes, and nervously wiped his brow. He mumbled that he didn't want any trouble, but under my unwavering glare, he broke. He pointed a trembling, wet finger toward a pristine, two-story colonial house 4 doors down. Number 42. It was Veda. According to the frightened neighbor, Veda had strutted down the street with a trash bag in hand, making a grand, theatrical display for anyone watching. Because there had been some loose, unbagged trash blown around the municipal bins by the morning wind, Veda had loudly deduced that the new people didn't know how to properly dispose of their waste. Without a shred of evidence, she gathered the street's stray garbage, marched up to my door, and vindictively stuffed it through my mail slot to teach me a lesson. I thanked the man, my voice hollow, and walked back to my house. I carried the kids inside, carefully stepping over the minefield of glass and rotting food, and secured them in their playpen in the carpeted living room. I locked the cats in the laundry room. Then I went to the downstairs bathroom. Normally, when cleaning the cats' litter boxes, I would dump the entire tray into a thick, heavy-duty trash bag. Not today. Today required precision. Today required artillery. I dug through the cabinet under the sink until I found exactly what I was looking for. The cheapest, thinnest, most structurally compromised plastic grocery bags available. The kind that tear if you look at them wrong. With a slotted scoop, I began to harvest. I bypassed the dry litter entirely. I meticulously excavated only the most potent, ammonia-soaked clumps of feline urine and the freshest, most foul pieces of solid waste the 3 cats had produced that morning. The smell was eye-watering, a pungent chemical burn that stung the nostrils, but I didn't flinch. I divided the biological payload evenly between 2 of the flimsy plastic bags, twisting the tops just enough to seal them, but not enough to reinforce the dangerously thin plastic stretched taut around the heavy, damp clumps. I walked out of my front door, leaving the mess in the hallway for later. I held the 2 sagging bags behind my back. My posture was perfectly straight. My breathing was slow and measured. The blood vessels in my eyes felt like they were vibrating. I marched the 60 yards down the sidewalk to number 42. The curtains along the street twitched frantically now. The neighborhood grapevine was functioning at peak efficiency. I pressed Veda's doorbell and held my finger over the button for 3 long seconds. Heavy footsteps approached. The deadbolt clicked and the door swung wide open. There stood Veda, wearing a crisp pastel yellow twinset and a string of pearls, sporting a calcified, smug grin that suggested she had just won a Nobel Prize for neighborhood watchfulness. The door was completely open, giving me a perfect, unobstructed view of her interior. It was a masterpiece of sterile suburban design. To the right, a grand staircase covered in plush, cream-colored carpeting. To the left, double doors wide open to a formal living room featuring white upholstered sofas. The hallway itself stretched back past the stairs to a powder room floored in spotless high-gloss hardwood. It was immaculate. It was a museum of pretension. I looked her dead in the eyes and asked, with a voice so intensely calm it sounded disconnected from my body, if she was the one who had forced garbage through my mail slot. Her grin widened, revealing a row of perfectly capped teeth. She didn't just admit it, she practically gloated. She puffed out her chest and explained in a cloying, condescending tone that because I was new, I clearly didn't understand the neighborhood rules. She claimed the loose trash on the street must have been mine because before I moved in, such things simply never happened. She said she was doing me a favor by returning my property. That was the exact millisecond the last tether to my sanity snapped. The calm vanished, replaced by a verbal hurricane. I stepped into her personal space, my voice escalating from a whisper to a deafening roar that echoed off the facades of the surrounding houses. I unleashed a tirade of blistering abuse, dismantling her arrogant assumptions piece by piece. I told her exactly how I had bagged my trash. I told her exactly what kind of jagged metal and broken glass she had shoved into my home. And then, I painted a vivid, horrifying picture of what those rusty lids and glass shards would have done to the bare knees and hands of my 1-year-old daughter who crawled on that exact floor. Veda's smug grin faltered. The color began to drain from her face as the sheer volume and ferocity of my anger physically pushed her a half-step backward. I didn't give her a chance to speak. I raised my voice 1 final octave, loud enough for the entire street to hear. "Since you are so incredibly passionate about cleaning up other people's messes," I roared, bringing my hands out from behind my back, "here, have mine." In one fluid, violent motion, I launched the 2 flimsy plastic bags directly into her pristine home. It was a masterclass in chaotic physics. The thin, cheap plastic was no match for the velocity and the heavy, damp mass inside. The first bag struck the sharp, right-angled corner of her cream-carpeted staircase. The plastic ruptured instantly upon impact. Like a claymore mine of feline waste, it detonated, sending heavy, wet clumps of ammonia-soaked litter and feces rocketing up the steps, embedding deeply into the plush fibers of the expensive carpet and smearing down the painted white spindles of the banister. The second bag hit the ornate wooden doorpost of the formal living room. It exploded with a wet, heavy thud. A spray of foul, gray-brown shrapnel flew sideways, splattering across the high-gloss hardwood floor and directly onto the arm of her immaculate white sofa. The stench hit the warm air of her hallway instantly. It was an overwhelming, suffocating cloud of concentrated cat urine. I locked eyes with Veda one last time. She was paralyzed. I pointed a finger directly at her face and delivered a final, chilling promise. I told her that if she ever came near my property, my children, or my animals again, if she even looked at my house sideways, I would return in the dead of night and shatter every single window in her colonial fortress. I didn't wait for a response. I turned on my heel and walked back down the driveway. I didn't look back, but the image of her face is permanently burned into my memory. It was a spectacular, rapidly shifting cocktail of emotions. Profound shock, sudden terror, absolute indignation, immediate physical nausea from the smell, and a deep, sinking despair as she turned to look at the catastrophic ruin of her cream carpet. The street was dead silent as I walked home. The lace curtains were perfectly still. I went inside, locked my door, and spent the next hour meticulously sanitizing my hallway on my hands and knees, safely removing every shard of glass. I lived in that house for another 11 years. In all that time, Veda never once made eye contact with me. If we happened to be pulling out of our driveways at the same time, she would violently throw her car into reverse and wait until I was out of sight. No one ever complained about my garbage. No one ever questioned my lawn care. The neighborhood remained perfectly, blissfully quiet. Sometimes, the only way to deal with a bully who thinks they own the street is to show them exactly what happens when they cross the line from petty nuisance to outright endangerment. People will make assumptions about you, they will judge you, and they will test your boundaries. But the moment those tests threaten the safety of your home and your family, you have every right to burn their pristine, cream-colored world to the ground. If you enjoyed this story of suburban warfare, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more tales of justified revenge, and let me know in the comments below. What's the most chaotic thing a neighbor has ever done to you?